Welcome to Taking Off with the Gary Chicago Airport Show. I'm your host, Pastor Marion Johnson. We have a very special guest here today, Mr. Mark E. Jones. Amen. He's a commander for the Gary Fire Department, and we're glad to have you. Glad you were able to come and participate with us, Officer Jones.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
All right, Officer Jones, we want you to tell us something about yourself. How did you first get started with the Gary Fire Department? Is this something that you wanted to do? Sometime as a little child, we may have aspirations to be something, have a desire to be a fireman. Has that always been with you? And just tell us about your background and all of that.
As a young adult, yes, I did want to be a firefighter. I always wanted to serve my community. I graduated from Westside High School. I'm a resident of Gary today. I was born in Gary, and I'm glad to still serve the community. Firefighting has always been a way for me to give back, and I'm a hands-on kind of guy. It lets me express myself the way I deem it the best way I can give back to the community.
Okay, so you say you were born in Gary, you graduated from Westside High School?
Yes.
Well, you had elementary education here also?
Absolutely.
Oh, your parents, what are your parents' names?
My parents are both deceased now.
Yes, and what were their names?
Bessie Jones and Johnny Jones.
All right, did they inspire in you to become a community servant, or this was something that you picked up along the way?
They inspired me to follow any dreams that I had. That's what they did.
Okay.
My father was a mill worker. My mother was a seamstress at Janice Sewing Manufactory that used to be here in Gary years ago.
Yeah, I remember that. And you've been on the department 24 years.
That's correct.
That's a long time. Tell us about your rookie experiences and what kind of training does a firefighter have to go through?
It's pretty extensive. We have to do physical training to make sure we have stamina and we're physically able to do the job. We have a lot of book courses and hands-on application. I think I got trained by some very good guys. They trained me well, they were hard on us in the proper way, and they led us, they led us to serve, They didn't let us take anything for granted. Everything that we learned in books, as my career went on, I began to realize out in the field. So
okay,
they helped me a lot.
Feel free to mention some of those guys, because I know when we come into any field, even with being a pastor, there were other pastors that I kind of took they became my mentors. So you can mention some of your mentors.
Oh, absolutely. Richard Gilliam. He was the chief of training when I came on.
Okay.
Gordon Bradshaw was a drill master. They were relentless in making us good firefighters.
Okay.
They gave us formal education, and I think it showed in most of the guys who graduated with me. It shows in our efforts.
What's most surprising about fighting fires that really surprised you? What were you most excited about or intrigued about when it came to fighting fire?
It wasn't so much a surprise, but as a rookie, and once I got out into the field, it dawned on me very quickly that someone actually has to extinguish these fires. It's not like a television dramatization. Someone has to make this a real thing.
So tell me about some of the different types of fires that you've experienced, and then just give us a overview of umbrella gamut of what types of fires occur and how do you put those fires out?
Well, in Gary, we do get a large load of structural fires. Abandoned buildings, some occupied buildings, a lot of auto accidents because of the highways, 94, the toll road, and we get a lot of hazardous good problems in this area because of the highways. So we get a lot of hazardous material incidents, and the fires, each one is different. Each one has its own uniqueness. The theory is the same, but the application can be different in every fire, depending on the fuels that are in the homes or what's actually burning. Technology is changing. We're building houses differently now with more plastics and more chemicals and biological things that present themselves at fires. And even construction. Construction is different now. We tend to do more with less. So some of the older homes and older structures had firewalls in them. They help prevent fires. Some of the newer structures, not so much.
Is it a matter of cost that they stop including those things, or?
I can't speak specifically on that, but I would have to imagine so. I mean, we're in a cost-efficient age now.
Okay, so what type of insulation would you put in your house to be less likely to catch on fire? What kind of things would you install in your house?
First and foremost, a smoke detector.
Okay.
I mean, they work. They work. They will alert you. They'll allow you the time to leave your structure. They'll allow you the time to get out of the house. A CO meter also. Very deadly these days. It's odorless, tasteless, but with a meter, it will sound the alarm. You know to evacuate, and then call.
So tell our general public what is a CO detector. I got an idea what
okay.
it is.
What it does is it takes carbon monoxide in the air. Those gas can be emitted from faulty furnaces or things like that, of that nature, things that leak in your house, like some natural gases, and they can be too enriched with carbon monoxide and exhaust fumes. What they would do, they would go off in time to enable you to leave the resident.
Okay, for the Gary Chicago International Airport, we know we have a station there. We have
Absolutely.
Fireman Station. And what type of fluids and things would you use to put out an aviation fire? And explain the difference to our listening public, our viewing public, the difference between an aviation fire and a regular fire. Make a comparison for us.
Okay, a structural fire, most of the combustibles are actually the contents of that home or that building. Things of wood, plastics, drywall, insulation. So the extinguishing agent that's most commonly used with structural fires is water.
Okay.
Reduces the heat, smothers the oxygen, kills the fire. Aviation fires, a bit different because of the fuels they use. Some planes use JetX or jet fuel. They burn at a much more intense rate than wood burning or even kerosene or even gasoline for that matter. So because they burn so quickly, we have to use foam sometimes or dry chemicals, things that will smother that fire. They could be water reactive. Water could make the matters worse depending on the type of metal that the plane is made of. And these fuels, you could get runoff. Water could cause the fuel to run and spread. So we need something that's more soluble with it and can contain it, like dry chems and dry powders.
Okay, it says something about a burn training. Can you explain to us what burn training is?
Burn training, as far as the airport goes, it's a FAA regulation. They have to have one live burn a year where they go and they have a mock drill and they actually ignite a fuselage, a plane. But Gary exceeds that. We do 2 live burns. FAA requires 1, we do 2, just to stay on top of the game. In the academy, when we do structural fires, we do live burns all the time. We can go to smokehouses and do them that are made for that purpose. And we can get some of the abandoned buildings. If we get permitted to do it, we can set control fires there and train on them.
Okay, so when you find the difference, which one ignites the fastest, a structural or aviation type fire, and which one is the hardest to distinguish?
With the proper agents and the proper equipment, you can put out an aircraft fire pretty quickly, and it may ignite quicker because of the faster burning fuel and the heat that it emits. Structural fires are a little different because you have to seek out the fire. I may have to go upstairs, downstairs. It may be hiding in between walls or in an attic or a crawl space. So it's they're different animals. A structural fire, you kind of have to seek out most of the time unless it's fully involved. I mean, that means the whole house is inflamed.
So an aviation fire pretty much identifies itself.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is there much smoke in an aviation fire compared to a structural fire?
In the fuselage and cockpit, yes, I would imagine to be a great deal of smoke because it's contained. Now, if the fuselage has been opened or breached, of course, you get more light and smoke can be released.
Okay, what would be the procedure? I'm just going to give you a scenario. God forbid if this scenario would ever happen. But if there would be an aircraft that would crash in a neighborhood, what would be the procedure? Do you guys have a certain type of procedure set up for those emergencies, those tragedies?
Yes,
like that?
there's a pre-plan set up. We have, and good question, actually most plane crashes, if you will, not a good word when speaking about airlines,
Yeah.
but if one goes down, they rarely go down at the airport, generally a field or somewhere close. Yes, we have mutual aid companies that will come in. We have rescue rigs, response rigs at the airport that carry foam and different extinguishing agents. They would come on the scene, and out here in the streets, we have a battalion. Wherever that wreckage may be, there's a set battalion that will respond to it, and we generally carry a complement of foam and other extinguishing agents like dry chem to extinguish the fire.
Okay, so it would be a different type of a fire truck, for the lack of a better term.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what's the difference between the two type vehicles?
A emergency response unit at the airport would carry foam and dry chem and dry powder and maybe halogen. And what they do, they have different nozzles. They'd have a piercing nozzle that could actually pierce the fuselage or skin of an airplane in order to get inside. Even though I may not send a man inside, but I could actually get the agent into the aircraft without going into the aircraft. It would pierce the skin of the aircraft, and we could inject the foam that way.
So tell us how this works. You can take your time and just explain to us if that would happen. How does that piece of equipment work?
It's manned. It has hand lines on it, and it's manned with a turret. So if the flames are too big, we can fight it at a distance without jeopardizing firefighter safety. Now, the main goal is to extract the souls from the fuselage. So we want to save lives. So we would make a rescue if possible, but first, if we can't, we'd have to extinguish the fire first, then do the rescue effort after the fire has been extinguished. Depending where the fire is at in the aircraft, we could use a turret and fight it at a distance. And if it's a small fire and we can get into the cabin or the fuselage, we can send men in with hand lines, which also carry foams or depending on which extinguishing agent is appropriate at the time. And they can fight it that way. That's what's called an interior attack.
So you said hand lines.
Hand lines, yes.
Yeah. Oh, hand lines. Okay. Is that hooked to the vehicle, the fire truck, and it? Okay.
It's part of the apparatus.
And when you're training for something like that, do they? Is it? You said a burn
Yes.
twice a year. And when you train for that, which way do they teach you to approach? From the back, or from the front, or from the side?
All depends on where the fire is in the craft.
So if it was in the front, tell us which way you would come.
If it were in the front,
go through
we
the whole
would probably
scenario.
come from one of the wings or from the uninvolved side. If the fire's in the front, we would come from the back or the opposite side of the fire. We don't want to push the fire throughout the plane. We want to keep it contained to one area. So if it were in the cockpit, we come from maybe the wing side and work this way.
Okay.
Or if it were here, we come from an uninvolved side and work a certain way. As we wouldn't, if the fire was here, we don't want to push it all the way through the craft.
And where would you penetrate the fuselage? Where would you?
That also depends on where the fire is at. If we're in the front, we would try to get it somewhere up in here, penetrate that, and keep the fire contained to the nose of the plane.
So you actually would pierce the frame of the fuselage?
The outer skin, yes.
Yeah, okay. And so this type of equipment is called what? What is it called?
It's a piercing nozzle.
Nozzle, okay. So it actually is made of what?
It's made of a hard alloy, and it's able to pierce the skin of the aircraft.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Suppose you had an engine fire.
That can be attacked several ways, with hand lines or a turret. A turret is merely like a deck gun on top of the apparatus that throws water from a distance.
Okay. How far of a distance can it throw water from?
Depends on the pressure. It depends. Sometimes you can get a good stream to 30, 40 yards.
So the firemen, the firefighters that are, and I have to say firefighters now, the firefighters that are stationed at the airport, what type of training do they receive, and how often do they have to go for the training?
They have, as a matter of fact, there are 16 of them actually.
Okay.
And they all have FAA certified training, which their training is a little different. They have our standard firefighting training, which everyone out in the city of Gary has, but they have some special training because special needs. I took the training years ago at O'Hare, and yeah, they teach you about the different agents, as I mentioned earlier, like the dry chem, the dry powder, and the foam, AFFF. They teach that you do live burns, so entering a plane is different from entering a structural fire. Plane, the actual maneuvering in the plane is pretty simple because plane is asymmetrical. So it's kind of hard to get lost in there, but the heat may not allow you to get into it. So yeah, they go through special training. They have to do burn drills, and every 3 years we have a disaster drill. Now, another thing that makes plane wreckage and plane fires different, we have to do what's called triage. We have to get a lot of agencies involved here. So if we actually take people from a plane, they have to be categorized to the severity of their injuries. Sometimes you have like what's known as the walking wounded, and you have to separate them from the ones who have to be immediately rushed to the hospital. So we have to coordinate with the hospitals, Lake County, to attend to all of the victims and whatnot.
So when you have the disaster training, how many departments does that include in this area?
In this area, almost all of the paid departments, East Chicago, Hammond, Gary, Griffith, and we also incorporate Lake Station, Lake Ridge, which are volunteer departments, Lake County Hazmat, and quite frankly, the more we can get, the better.
Okay, so the volunteer fire departments, they take part in this,
Absolutely.
in this
Yes,
drilling
they do.
also? What is the difference in the training with a volunteer firefighter over those that are paid?
The training is no different.
No different?
The training is NFPA standard, National Firefighters Protection Agency standard. The training is the same.
And how long are you gone for the original training? Something like boot camp for
the academy?
For Army?
Right now, our academy is a little different now because when you come out, you're a firefighter 1-2, and you're also an EMT, an emergency medical technician. So we're talking about 26, 27 weeks of training before you ever get out on the streets.
And a volunteer fire person has to go through that too?
No, the volunteers, I think they only have to have firefighter 1. I don't think they have to go through a full academy. They don't have to be EMTs.
So EMTs can also capable of doing what?
Now they'll be capable, when they come out of our academy, they'll be capable of being firefighters.
Okay.
So when they come on now to be a firefighter, when you leave the academy, you'll be a firefighter / EMT.
Okay, okay, because at one time we had a department that was all they did.
That's right, you were just a
EMT.
firefighter. This is a
Okay,
new implementation.
so it's advanced quite a bit over the years.
Oh, absolutely.
So how many changes have you seen in these 24 years
Oh my
you've been?
gosh. The fire service constantly changes. Technologies change. The way we fight fire changes. The hazards change. That's why we have to change. I mean, we build things with different materials now than we did 20 years ago. 40 years ago, everything was just wood. So you had to worry about it. You go into houses now, you have plastics, synthetics, foams, and different things that can cause cancer-causing agents and emit much more heat than just the old 40 years ago wood fires and drywall.
Okay, if a young man had aspirations of becoming a firefighter, what would you suggest would be the top 3 things they should get ready for?
Discipline.
Okay.
Have a willingness to learn, and make sure your heart's in it.
Okay. Need to be disciplined.
Absolutely.
And need to be willing to learn.
Absolutely.
And your heart needs to be in it.
Yes.
Well, those are 3 great suggestions. So we have many young people that view this show. So if there happens to be one, speak to me as you would speak to one young man or young woman that's really interested in being a fire person. What would you say to them on a personal level?
I would say to them, if it's really their dream, to seek it out. Don't give up on it. And anything you want to do, be the best you can be at it. So as the job changes, you change with the job.
Okay. Okay, so we know that the Gary Chicago International Airport is in good hands because of gentlemen like you.
Thank you.
And you are a commander. What is your job title and your responsibilities?
I'm a division commander currently. What I do is I staff the city on my shift. There are 3 shifts. And what I do is I staff the fire stations and the rigs according to the manpower. I have to put certain people in certain places to make things work properly. Each rig has to have an officer and a driver operator. I have to make sure that the right people are in the right places, and I have to account for those people. I have to schedule vacations for 54 odd people throughout the city so we don't deplete the manpower. We all can't be gone at the same time.
Okay, with the manpower, I know there was a manpower issue at the Gary Chicago International Airport, and they finally got it worked out.
Yes.
Are there anyone that, well, you said it's 16, and all 16 of those are aviation specialists
FAA
as
certified.
well as FAA certified. Have you ever had a hard time putting everybody in place for a shift? Does it sometimes get to be a little tedious?
It can, but we have resources, and through the grace of God, it works out.
Yeah.
I get them where they need to be.
Okay, okay. So we thank you for coming. I thank God that we haven't had a aviation fire in Gary, not that I know of. If it has, it's been many years ago.
We actually had one this year.
We had one this year, and that was the little.
It was a small
aircraft.
Cessna, 2-passenger plane.
Were you involved in that?
Actually, no, I wasn't.
And unfortunately, 2 people lost their lives.
Yes, they perished.
Okay, what was the response from the fire department when that happened?
Gary was first on the scene. There wasn't much of a fire. When planes go down because of the explosion and the impact, it generally blows the fire itself out, especially small planes like that. So it was a matter of sifting through wreckage and, unfortunately, picking out body parts and calling in other resources and letting the proper people know what was going on, because they have to do a lot of investigating, and it's puzzle work. They have to literally put the plane back together and figure out why it went down.
Did they ever come out with a final report on what happened with that? I don't remember seeing it or reading it.
I can't speak on that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and it didn't occur on the airport itself.
No, it did not. They rarely do.
Yeah. And then when FAA comes in, tell us the procedure FAA when a plane crashes.
When they come in, they try to reconstruct what happened. They'll gather all the data, all the information, all of the proceedings that happened prior to the plane going down. And they'll check all the instrumentation to see if something failed in the plane.
Is there such thing as a black box in a
Yes,
little
there
aircraft?
is. But the black box is actually orange, but I don't know why they call it a black box, but it's actually orange.
It's orange, but they call it a black box.
Yeah, but yes, there is.
Yeah. And that feeds all the data up to what happened right up to the time of the crash? Okay, okay. So I imagine some kind of report should be out pretty soon, if it's not already out.
It may already be out.
I'm
I'm not certain of that.
I think I'll check on that. I'm kind of curious of what happened in that situation, but the Gary Fire Department was the first on the scene.
Yes.
The police department also shows up in situations like that?
Yes, and they were there.
And then how long did it take for the FAA to get there? Do you have any idea?
They were there for a few days. Now, how long did it take for them to get there, I'm not sure, but
okay.
They were on the scene for 2-3 days.
Okay, Commander, we're getting ready to close out now. In your last, these last few minutes, I want you to tell the people of the city of Gary what can they do to make their homes safe, and those not just in the city of Gary, but in Northwest Indiana as a whole.
Sure. Be safety conscious. Smoke detectors. It's such a small thing, but it's a large thing when it comes to your safety. They really work. They alert you. Know where the people in your home are at. Even when they're not there, if they should be at home, you should know that. So if the event happens that you do have a fire, you can account for them. Have a designated meeting spot in the event of a fire. That way you can do a head count. That's so important. People forget that. You don't want to run out of the house and then think that you left a loved one inside. If you have a designated meeting spot and you all go there, you know where they're at. Never go back in for personal belongings or material things. You can always get things. We can't get another you.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
But we want to thank you once again, Mr. Mark Jones, for coming, and Commander for coming and sitting in with us. And we've been informed. You've been watching the Gary Chicago Airport International Airport Show. I've been your host, Pastor Marion Johnson. A very special guest today has been Commander Mark E. Jones. And you keep the good work up, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. I will.
So what's the biggest fire?
you.